Hi there. I'm Toby Farman. I'm an Upwell staff member, and thank you for watching our live Q&A with Dr. Niall McCann. We've had a few questions in from people that have sent us over the last kind of week or so as we've released the video. Hopefully you've all had a chance to watch it by now. If you do have any questions for Niall, please do feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll ask them to him as they kind of come up, or please do feel free to email xsitu@opwell.com as well. Even during the talk, I'll spot them and ask them as we're going along. But yeah, thanks for showing up, and I guess let's go on with the talk. So Niall, thanks for coming along.
You're more than welcome, Toby. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we'll start off with the questions that we got in via email first. So I guess the first one is, what careers can you have in combating poaching and illegal wildlife trade, and what tips would you give to someone interested in this area?
Yeah, so apologies for the sound of my daughter yelling in the background. My wife will probably corral her in a minute. I think one of the things to appreciate at the moment is that conservation is no longer just an industry for biologists, and the same goes for anti-poaching as well. Conservation, anti-poaching, and everything that we do is now an industry for everyone. All conservation organizations need accountants, they need social media personnel, that they need business people, as well as needing biologists and conservationists. And when you're thinking about anti-poaching in particular, anti-poaching is really a law enforcement challenge more than anything else. The illegal trade in wildlife is a multi-billion-dollar trade, estimated at $20 billion a year. That rises to $200 billion a year if you also count the illegal trade in fish and timber and those products. So the thought that that trade should be combated by biologists alone is naive in the extreme. So how to get into this career? Be anything. You could be a banker and still have a career in conservation and anti-poaching. In fact, it's vital. We've got the Illegal Wildlife Trade Financial Task Force and the Transport Task Force. So people involved in the airline industry are now involved in combating the illegal wildlife trade and trafficking, because it affects us all. And no matter what your background is, there's a place for you within conservation and within anti-trafficking and anti-poaching. You're still on mute.
I knew I was going to make that mistake at least once. Okay, so thank you for that. The second question we've got is, how did you get into science communication, and how important do you think television and other media is in global conservation?
Whoa, so two distinct parts of the question. So how did I get in? I was, from a young age, from 18 onwards, doing quite interesting remote area biological stuff. So going into fun parts of the world, scrambling around looking for animals. And from a relatively early age, was taking video of that, which meant that I had material, a bit of a back catalogue, a library with which to show people. And when you're doing interesting expeditions and adventures, as I was, as a biologist and then kind of in my private life as well, inevitably the local press pay attention. You get your picture in the Shrewsbury Chronicle, or other local newspapers, and then that expands out a little bit. And before long, I was starting to speak to various production companies that were interested in following the types of work that I was doing. And from first speaking to a production company about potentially making a television program about my research and the adventures I was going on, it was 10 years until a program finally did land. And it just gives you an idea of how difficult that industry is to break into, especially if, like me, you're not pushing that as your primary career. Like, my primary career has always been as a biologist, and the television stuff has always been secondary. So it certainly didn't happen overnight. It was 10 years, almost to the month, from first speaking to a TV company to finally traveling out to Brazil and making a film about a British explorer called Percy Fawcett. And then I've been lucky enough to make 3 seasons of The Biggest and Baddest since then, and various other things as well as a narrator. Secondly, how important is the television industry? Well, again, that's a much more complicated question than you might think. So as a result of David Attenborough, and largely him, but also people like Steve Backshall, who's got an amazing reach into children in particular, so many more people are interested in the natural world than would otherwise be. But despite that, we've still lost 60% of the Earth's biodiversity during the time that David Attenborough has been active. So even though many more people are interested, they're still not having a sufficient impact. Television is still not having a sufficient impact to change the practices of government and of business, etc., etc. So I think, from my perspective, I like the fact that through television I have a soapbox to encourage people to be biologists and take an interest in the natural world. And I hope I've made some people that wanted to be bankers stop wanting to be bankers and start wanting to be biologists instead. But I wouldn't feel as though I was having enough of an impact if I was only doing television. And I think that's been Attenborough's one mistake, is not being political enough. So I spend a huge amount of my time lobbying government, directly in with the British government, making sure that they put conservation and the environment at the heart of their international development aid. And now that COVID has demonstrated that the environment affects everybody and poor environmental policy affects everybody, I think the doors to other departments within government will now be open. So I no longer need to just focus on DFID and DEFRA. I can now start looking at the Department of Business and Trade as well, because everything they do also has an environmental underpinning. And if they continue with the way they're doing things at the moment, COVID number 3, so as we were saying earlier, SARS-CoV-3 will be around the corner, and that will be worse than the current one. But everybody needs to get involved, and I think television is not enough just on its own. You also have to be political.
Great. Just out of curiosity, one from me, I guess. Do you have any kind of upcoming TV work, or the 4th season of Biggest and Baddest, or anything like
that? Maybe there will be a 4th season. Who knows? So at the end of this year, in November, there's a big BBC program called The Perfect Planet, which is their latest Planet Earth. And in the 5th, there's 5 episodes. In the 5th episode, there are 3 non-Attenboroughs contributing, and I'm one of the non-Attenboroughs. So Attenborough narrates the entire thing, and in the 5th episode, I'm one of the non-Attenboroughs that contributes. That'd be nice. That's supposed to be coming out in November. There's a program coming up. I don't actually know exactly when, but it's Discovery and the BBC on the Red List, and I'm one of the contributors to that. And then when it comes to actual series, various things potentially in the pipeline, potentially even Biggest and Baddest number 4. Who knows? We'll just see.
Yeah, that was great. Okay, so next question. So just moving on. And I apologize if I butcher the name of the national park for this question, but with regards to the work being done in Chisarura National Park, are there other ways that the community have been integrated into the project in addition to the employment of local people as rangers?
Yeah, good question. What's been really important for us is creating what I've called a microeconomy between the park and the communities that surround it. And employment's a critical way of doing that. So employing local people in the activities of the park means that the livelihoods of those people and their families are dependent upon the success of the park. But that's only having an impact really on a minimal number of people. So we've got 31 local staff and then their families. Let's say that's 7 people on average, give or take. So we've got in the region of 200 to 250 people that are dependent upon us for employment. But there's 4,500 people that live in the nearest community area, and probably 50,000 if you go to the entire surrounding of the park. And they need to be integrated in other ways as well. And the next major way we've done that is through commerce. So we buy all the food for the rangers from the local people. The rangers in Zimbabwe and all national parks are allowed a quota of wildlife that they can shoot for their own rations, which includes elephants and various other things. It's absolute insanity, but that's the way the Zimbabweans do things. And of course, we banned that as soon as we started, because it's wrong in many ways. But we had to replace that protein deficit with other protein. And so we buy cows from the community that we then have slaughtered. Now, my co-director is a vegan, and he has authored a humane slaughter guide. He's probably the only vegan to have authored a slaughter guide, and every slaughter of every cow that we have killed, which is once a month on the 15th of the month, they have to read the guide before it, and we film every single one to make sure it happens properly. So there's total transparency on that side of things to make sure that animal welfare is maintained as best as possible. And we buy those cows on rotational basis from the communities that surround the park, so each community gets a proportion of that dividend. And we buy it at market rates, which is about $500 to $600 per cow, 2 a month. So that's about between $1,000 and $1,200 that are going into the community just on meat every month. Plus we buy all our dry rations. We gave a load of vegetable seeds, and we buy the vegetable products back as well to multiple communities. So a lot of commerce is happening between us and the communities, which again creates an interdependence between the park that need food and the communities that need the trade. And then the third way is tourism. I'm reticent, as COVID has demonstrated, relying upon tourism for funding conservation is like building up a house of cards, which is going to fall down. I think what we need to be looking at in the future is going way beyond tourism for financing conservation. And we need to be looking at mechanisms like afforestation, carbon capture, and the types of things that Operation Wallacea is doing really well in trying to investigate. Global economies need to start taking this into account as well. And British aid organizations, USAID, everyone else needs to start focusing on funding environmental protection in a way that doesn't rely upon tourism. Now, for the time being, tourism is a major factor, and we've increased tourism 600% since we started in that park, from very little to not very much. But there's definitely scope for improving that over the next little while.
Great. I'm just going to jump to another question, because we had a question come in via the chat, which is also talking about the work you do with National Park Rescue.
Yeah.
So I'll skip a couple and just go to that one while we're on the topic of it. So is there going to be any film documenting the work of National Park Rescue and the fantastic female ranger team that's been formed? Yes.
So on our website at the moment, which is nationalparkrescue.org, you can see a short trailer, kind of a minute and a half, shows some of the work that we've done. We've recorded everything. So we've got an amazing back catalogue or library of imagery that we will release, and the intention is to release that as a full documentary this year. Partially as a fundraising thing for National Park Rescue, because it's necessary for us, and partially to raise awareness of the female ranger team and of everything else that we're doing as well. If people are interested in seeing some of the materials we've got at the moment, drop me an email and I can send along. We've got a 25-minute cut at the moment, which talks about our background, the work in Malawi, and then how we chose Chizarira National Park and the first year of operations in Chizarira. And if people would like to see that, then drop me a line. But we should have a proper release of a decent documentary some point later this year, given any luck.
Great. Okay, so next question we've got is, has a threat to personal safety whilst carrying out conservation or anti-poaching in the regions you've worked with increased over the years?
Good question. So yes, it has, and that's globally. There has been an increase in environmental assassinations and threats over time. Brazil and India are particularly bad on a global scale. If you look at the number of assassinations related to environmentalism globally, it's huge in those two countries. Links to lots of things. Yeah, it's too many to go into now. One thing that's very interesting is that Canadian companies are disproportionately implicated in environmental assassinations. So in Latin America, Canadian companies are implicated in about 1/3 of all environmental assassinations. So Canada, this squeaky clean, everyone wants to be like Canada, has a bit of a dark underbelly. And when it comes to their resource extraction and the companies involved in resource extraction, they have a lot to answer for. If you haven't watched the film Virunga about the national park in the Democratic Republic of Congo, watch it. It's on Netflix. It's absolutely outstanding. And Virunga just lost another 12 rangers last week in an attack by militia, as well as one of their drivers and 4 civilians. Me personally, I've rarely been threatened. Did end up in a Mexican standoff where we had larger guns than they did, and we all just slowly walked away from each other. And that was in a difficult part of Honduras, so not where Operation Wallacea works, somewhere else. But on the whole, I've been amazed how little I've experienced the threats that really are there because of some of the work I've been doing. But of course, my team arrest people all the time. Just this year, we've had 62 arrests so far in Chizarira National Park. Not all of those are poachers. A lot of those are illegal herders, but they're still arrested and given a small fine. So they're threatened on a daily basis.
Okay, great. So the next question, I'm going to combine it. I'm going to bring together two of the different questions that we've had, just because I think it's something that quite a few people are interested in. The first of which is the longer question that I sent you prior to the talk. But it basically it comes down to how do you kind of go about, what's the best way of kind of going about forging a career in conservation or in active frontline conservation?
Yeah, so it's a great thing that conservation is becoming more popular. More and more people want to get into it, which is brilliant. Fewer and fewer people want to be bankers or other horrendous things. More and more people want to have a positive impact on the world. They want to be a shining light and make the world a better place, and conservation is a wonderful way to do that. The issue with that is that it means that it's now an intensely competitive industry. Just getting onto grad schemes is immensely competitive, let alone getting employment in various companies. And so doing whatever you possibly can to differentiate yourself from your competition, because ostensibly that's what everyone else is really important. So volunteering as much as is possible from a young age, obviously choosing the right types of subjects to specialize in. Doing a PhD is not for everybody, and it's by no means necessary to get into conservation, having a PhD. It was very useful for me, but it's not for everyone. It's not the right thing for everyone. Not everyone wants to spend 4 or 5 years studying or learning a lot about very little. But yeah, following at least doing a degree in zoology is a useful thing to do. But as I alluded to earlier, conservation organizations need everything from cleaners and accountants through to economists and business people and conservationists and biologists. So no matter what your background, there's still room for you within conservation. The key is, I suppose, finding a niche for yourself in some way, specialize in some way, and then volunteer locally or apply locally. If you start with a local wildlife trust and get a job there, which is much easier than necessarily applying for a big organization, you'll then build your repertoire of experience and make your application much stronger elsewhere. So don't be afraid to start local and work for a small NGO. The other benefit of working for a small NGO is you will have more of an impact on the ground. Big NGOs, you will get lost in there. Whereas if you're working for someone small, you'll have a big impact. And so I suppose that's the easiest way in for many people, is find a local NGO doing good local things in their area, work for them, and then build your CV before you start applying for the big guys.
I've got to say, from an Opwell perspective as well, because we obviously do quite a lot of the recruitment for jobs like this. Finding a niche, as Niall says, is hugely important. A lot of the summer staff that we have, a lot of the researchers we have on the ground, work locally in the UK as ringers, for example. They might have a PhD, and some of them don't even have a biology background. But if you've got the skills, then that's just as important. Well, that's more important in many respects than the qualifications. If you've got the skills behind it, if you've got the experience, working as volunteering as a batter locally, or volunteering as a birder or anything like that, find a niche and stick with it. But yeah, so on to the next question. Let's go with, you said your greatest wildlife encounter on the video was seeing a tiger. Do you think there's anything that could top that?
Yeah, it wasn't just seeing a tiger; it was having a tiger charge at me. That was one of the unique things about that. I've been lucky enough. I've seen tigers 3 times. On 2 of those occasions, they were charging at me. The other occasion, it was walking away, and I was on foot, which made it that also quite an exciting moment. April last year, I had one of the most unique experiences I've ever had in natural history, where I came across a king cobra attempting to predate an Indian python. Now, king cobras are almost exclusively ophiophagic, so they eat other snakes, and that's essentially all they eat. But for them to take on a python and for that to be seen and witnessed is incredibly rare, to the extent that we've been able to publish it as a note in the Herpetological Review. So that was pretty extraordinary. It was a 12-foot long king cobra fighting a 6-foot or 6'1" python, and we witnessed it for about 45 minutes. And for much of that time, it looked as though the cobra was going to die. It was being strangled by the python, but we'd seen it had bitten the python a couple of times as well. Eventually, the cobra managed to untwist itself from the coils of the python, pulled itself away, and then we bagged them both. So we caught them both, stuck them in bags, and then monitored them over the next day. 17 hours later, the python died as a result of the envenomation. And then the next day, we released the cobra, otherwise unharmed, back into the wild. So that was a pretty extraordinary experience. Just seeing that, and I got some lovely imagery of that as well. We filmed it for Biggest and Baddest, and it's the first time it's been filmed by a professional crew as well, that type of interaction. So that was pretty extraordinary. And then I've had a lion wake up out of anaesthetic next to me. That was a concerning moment. It wasn't meant to wake up quite as quickly as it did. The day before, the lion had taken about 2.5 hours to wake up, and this one took 45 seconds, and I was still stood very much within its reach when it woke up and went mad. So that was an interesting moment. And then I've had a few moments of serenity as well, being at sea in a small boat and having a whale, humpback whale, circle me for half an hour, getting closer and closer. That was pretty special. Things like that. Seeing phosphorescence glowing at night, and so dolphins coming up to the boat and shining in the phosphorescence. That was pretty special. So at the other end of the panic spectrum, from having a lion wake up out of anaesthetic or having a tiger charge at you, those moments of serenity, I think, are equally powerful in reminding you that being interested in wildlife, it's a really powerful thing, and there's very little better you can do with your life than to study the world around you and the animals that live in it.
Okay. So the next question we've got is comes from the chat as well. So it's what would you recommend is the best way to make a positive impact on biodiversity based on current problems, excluding COVID?
Yeah. Okay, well, everything's linked. So encouraging afforestation and stopping deforestation has a positive impact on everything. It improves biodiversity, reduces the likelihood of pandemics coming out. So, zoonotic disease, zoonotic spillover from animals into people has quadrupled in the last 50 years, and that's as a result, principally, of our incursion into natural habitats, increasing that human-wildlife interface. Preserving biodiversity, the most important thing we can do is stop or curtail deforestation, and that's a huge thing. But it's not just that. You look in the forests of Southeast Asia, outside of the areas that are having massive deforestation, you've also got the empty forest syndrome. So Laos and Cambodia, Vietnam, those places where there's not overwhelming amounts of deforestation, but there is absolutely overwhelming amounts of poaching happening. It's mainly with snares and that type of stuff, and the forests are empty. They can still trap carbon. They're still serving many ecosystem services like that, but they're empty of wildlife, and that is only going to have a negative impact in the long term. What can we do as individuals? There's huge amounts you can do. Firstly, think very carefully about how you vote, because the people that are making decisions are the people in power. So if you voted for Donald Trump, you have personally had a negative impact on the world, not just in terms of biodiversity, but in terms of everything else. And you should take that personally, because that was your fault. And likewise, every country in the world, think about how you vote. That's a major thing. Think about what you buy, what you eat, how you interact with the people around you. We've all got relatives that are doing bad things, and we can encourage them to do less bad things, for example. And then supporting smaller NGOs that have a really positive impact locally. And I think a focus on deforestation or afforestation would be a really important way of promoting biodiversity.
Perfect. Okay, so the next couple of questions we've got are from someone that's hoping to become a science journalist. They've asked, what kind of luck does it take to make such a big impact in science?
Yeah, everything is a combination of circumstance, of being the right person in the right place at the right time. I'm sure there are some extraordinarily talented science journalists out there that just never got that break. Organizations like Monga Bay do internships, and some of them are paid, which is great. There's enough big organizations that do unpaid internships, and they shouldn't. So yeah, getting involved with a type of organization like that would be brilliant. Following the types of journalists that they've got, so Rhett Butler, Jeremy Hance, those types of guys, and having a look at their writing and the stories they've followed. And they've started with Monga Bay, and now they've branched out and both done a lot with other aspects of mainstream media as well, so The Guardian and those types of things. There's so much luck in it. Like, you could be hugely talented, but just not get your break. But you've got to try, because if you don't try, then you definitely won't succeed. So keep on writing whatever it is you're writing, or making the bits of online journalism that you're doing. Keep on putting it out there, and apply for everything. Just apply for everything. Build your CV and apply for every job going. Write to these journalists directly and ask if they'll take you under their wing. Or if you've got something you think's really worth putting out there, write to the opinion desk of The Guardian or The Independent or wherever it is. They do accept opinion letters. They won't publish them all. I get things bounced all the time, most recently this week. But write to them and see whether anything will stick. But stay in it. Just because it's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't try it. So keep on at it.
Okay, so the next question we've got is, what is the most important mission you have as a biologist?
Right, most important mission I have as a biologist. Goodness me, yeah. To make the world a better place. I suppose it's a short answer. So specifically, what I am trying to do as a biologist is to reduce human-wildlife conflict, and that's in many ways. So I'm trying to get the British government in particular to focus on the environment, and to understand that the environment doesn't undermine our economy, it props it up. Our entire economy is built on the foundations of the integrity of the environment. And if we break down that integrity, then our economy breaks down, as COVID has demonstrated, as the floods in the UK this winter have demonstrated, as the fires in Australia have demonstrated. If we have bad environmental policy, you have massive negative impacts on human health, wealth, and well-being. And so the biggest role I feel I can play as an individual is to focus the government's attention on the fact that environmentalism is a necessary part of our being as humans. Therefore, it's a necessary part of every budget that they draw up, of the budget of every single department. Then, in a small way, just trying to make a difference on the ground. So I think it's important for us to do that. Not everybody has the luck to be able to speak to government or to have an influence on government, but you can all have an impact in your local area. You can plant trees. You can stop your neighborhood poacher, or whatever it is. We can all do little things, and I'm trying to do that as well. So for National Park Rescue, our flagships will always be the national parks, where we're having essentially a relatively small impact, small area. 31 people work for us. So as I said earlier, maybe 250 people are dependent on us for their livelihoods. The number of animals in there that we're really saving is minimal on a global scale, but it's important that we're doing it. So that will be our flagship, but in the background, I'm trying to have that global impact with governments. And yeah, it's important to try both. But if you can't have that impact on a global scale, you can still do great things at home, and so do that.
Okay, great. So we've had you here for about half an hour now, Niall. So I'll just have a couple more questions for you, and then we'll let you go. So just to can't keep you all day, obviously. But the next question we've got actually ties in, I think, quite nicely with the one that you've just answered as well. So it's what do you think is the main reason people are separated from fully understanding the importance of major world issues related to science, and how do you think we can help bridge that gap?
Yeah, another great question. So I think the main reason people are separated from it is because they realize there's two things. So it seems too big for them to be able to challenge themselves. And then secondly, they know that they need to change their own behavior. What science tells us is it challenges us. And what we know about climate science is that your own behavior has an impact. We know this about biodiversity impact as well. All of the things that we're doing, decisions we make as individuals, have an impact on the world around us. And many people are really reticent to accept that. And they just won't. They'll decide that those aren't the facts I want to hear. I'd rather some alternative facts. And so breaking through that, I think it's making people understand that they can have a difference without having a negative impact on their life. That by putting the environment first, actually you can easily make yourself better. If you cycle instead of drive, your heart will be better off. Your lungs will be better off. All of these little micro improvements we can make on our own lives have a knock-on positive impact on the world. I think trying to get people to understand that you don't need a seismic shift, it's just a few little things, and that you will benefit from them, I think is quite critical. Yeah, breaking it down into bite-sized things is really important because people feel overwhelmed that they can't make a difference. And then some people are just stupid and ignorant and are just out to make the world worse, and you just have to deal with those guys as well, unfortunately.
The unfortunate reality of humanity sometimes, isn't it? Okay, so we're just got one more question for you then. Let's go with what was the biggest thing you learned from your PhD, personal or biological?
Oh goodness, well, I learned a lot about tapirs. Very little you can tell me about tapirs that I don't already know. In fact, I'd go so far as to say I've probably forgotten more about tapirs than you've ever known. But in the grand scheme of things, how important is that? No, so the most important thing I learned through my PhD, for me personally, was that being in academia was not the right thing for me. So I realized that if I was going to have a real impact on the world, it was not going to be as an academic. And for some people, it is as an academic. It's the right thing for them to do. And doing a PhD for them just confirms that. For me, I realized that I needed to be on the front line of conservation if I really wanted to have an impact. I'm not a good enough scientist. I'm not a good enough statistician to be making earth-shattering papers. And I didn't feel that I was changing enough as an academic. So I'm delighted I have my PhD. It was a wonderful thing to do, and it also gives me the credentials to be able to knock on the government's door and say, "Listen, I'm Dr. McCann." And it makes them listen. But for me, I realised that it wasn't the career that I thought it was going to be for me. I think my mum's still slightly disappointed that I'm not going to end up as a sandal-wearing professor, but I'm not. If I want to have an impact on the world, and I do, then it has to be in conservation as opposed to in conservation biology. And those two things are subtly different, but significantly different.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much for everything, Niall. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for speaking to us and the wonderful video that you made for us. But yeah, we'll let you go now. Is there anything that you wanted to add just to finish off, like Twitter handle or anything like that you wanted to chuck in? Or
yeah. Google my name if you're interested, but I'm sure you're not. Just great. The fact anyone sat here listening to this already means they wanted to make the world a better place. So great, keep on doing what you're doing.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone in the audience for watching. We sincerely hope you enjoyed this. And yeah, stay safe, and we'll see you soon at the next kind of Situ Q&A. Cheers for now.